Hey everyone, welcome back to Brewbound Frontlines, our weekly live stream check-in with beer industry leaders on the moves they're making in this fast-changing business climate. I am Justin Kindle, the editor of Brewbound, and I'm joined, as always, on my favorite socially distant social hour with Jess by Jess Infante. What is up, Jess?
Hi, Justin. Nothing. How are you?
Oh, I'm just about as good as the 10 different times that we talked today, I always love when we pretend that we don't talk at all before this.
Well, you seem a little bit zippier than you did this morning, so.
Coffee will do that to a person. Today, we're bringing together the owners of 4 Massachusetts craft breweries of varying sizes that have been in growth mode. They're going to be here to discuss the growth of their companies last year, how COVID-19 has altered their strategies for 2020 and beyond, and the advice that they'd give fellow craft breweries and other states. Joining us today to discuss are Sam Hendler, co-founder of Jack's Abbey Craft Lagers in Framingham. Sam is also the president of the Massachusetts Brewers Guild. Thanks for joining us, Sam. I think you're muted.
Oh, man, I already failed. Thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you here. I did not mention Springdale, but you are a house of brands. So we also have David Fields here, the managing partner for Wormtown Brewery in Worcester, Massachusetts. What's up, Dave?
Welcome to Worcester, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. Joining us also are 2 new dads. We have Adam Romanow, the founder and president of Castle Island Brewing in Norwood. What's up, Adam?
What's up, Justin? Good to be with you, man.
Thanks for being here. I'm glad Bridget also is making an appearance behind you. And finally, we also have other new dad, Dino Funari, the co-founder of Vitamin C Brewing in Weymouth, one of my favorite places, Weymouth. What's up, Dino?
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here. And before we get started, for our audience out there, if you have a question for one of our panelists or all of our panelists, shoot us a text at 617-336-8560. That's 617-336-8560. We'll get your questions answered. Just fire away. And finally, a programming note. Next week, we're going to take the week off. Our sister publications, BevNet and Nosh, are holding a virtual conference on Tuesday and Wednesday. And being a small company, our resources are a little stretched. So we won't be coming to you for another month. But when we do come back, we'll be talking about loosening regulations across the country due to the novel coronavirus and what the return of the on-premise looks like, including the Main Street to Bourbon Street phenomenon that we've seen in cities and states across the country. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So let's just get to today's discussion. 2019 feels like a decade ago at this point, but in reality, it's only been in 6 months or so. Last year was a very, very good year for Massachusetts craft breweries, and each of your businesses were in growth mode. According to the BA, volumes at Jack's Abbey and Wormtown increased 15% and 27% respectively. Castle Island increased volume 7%, and Vitamin C, which was in its first year, sells out routinely, drawn lots of lines to its brewery in Weymouth. So let's start here on the positive note. Briefly recap your 2019 and what drove that growth for you. And I'll start with Sam.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like hard to think back that far. 2019 was a really solid year. The growth for us was in our home state, really. Certainly some of our core markets, New Hampshire and New York as well, but the vast majority of our growth was where the vast majority of our sales are here in Massachusetts. Big growth off premise. The growth of our newer brand Springdale certainly helped on volume as well. And it was core packages. It was just growth of volume of core packages, chain, off-premise, just kind of beer moving a little bit faster. And that's been great to see.
Nice. David, 27% volume growth, that's pretty strong. Give us an overview of what went right for Wormtown last year.
Sure. I mean, we always try not to focus on what went right because we feel like it brings us a little bad luck maybe, but we did a couple things strategically that we knew we were going to do going into the year. One of them was release a complimentary IPA. So it's the first time we've had a second IPA on the shelves called Don't Worry. Obviously a natural to put up alongside on the shelves with Be Hoppy, and we had great success with that launch. And it's really continued to be a really good, strong secondary IPA for us. That drove a portion of it. We also started playing around with some non-traditional media. For the first time in the first quarter last year, we put up some fun billboards kind of around Boston, some stuff out this way, a little bit down on the South Shore, and just kind of some similar things. They feel non-crafty, but we think we were able to do them and execute them in a Wormtown kind of way. And last but not least was we opened our second tap room at Patriot Place, and that allowed us to play around with some fun styles on a 7-barrel pilot system, but also connected us to fans from around New England, as well as all those visiting teams coming in from all over the country. And we think those three things had a big impact on that number.
That's great. And I love the product placement you just did there. Adam, a lot of good things happening at Castle Island. Take us through your 2019.
Yeah, 2019 for us was it was a year of big reflection, honestly. And although we still grew 7%, we pulled back big time on a lot of the specialty projects that we were pushing out to market, mostly because we kind of learned that there's a little consumer fatigue on repeating some of the specialty brands. So we released a couple of new specialty brands that replaced old specialty brands. There were more of them, but smaller drops that all overall meant smaller volume. But where we really saw growth was in our core products, which were up more than 11% in 2019. That's really driven by Keeper, our IPA. But we also introduced a white ale last spring that definitely helped round out the portfolio, added on some nice volume. And then we launched Rhode Island last spring and part of Connecticut back in October, which was really kind of incremental growth. They're great states to be part of, as they're pretty much neighboring to where we are here in Norwood. But overall contributions to volume were really driven by core brands in the greater Boston market.
That's awesome. So Dino, a year in, take us through that journey a little bit and give us an overview of how that went for you.
Well, it was a whirlwind, definitely. We had been trying to open for quite some time, so there was definitely some pent up anxiety, I guess, with people, anxious people trying to get to our place. So we certainly we took advantage of that right out of the gate. We had a line culture there, and it really hasn't subsided even a year and a half in now. We also did a lot of festivals throughout the year and collaborations too to build the brand nationally and internationally too. So I think we being the new kid on the block, if you will, that certainly helped a lot, and there was a lot of excitement around it. So we tried to use that to our advantage.
Cool. So it sounds like everybody had a really great 2019, but as we all know, the world is an entirely different place, and the pre-COVID times no longer exist. So for you guys, how much of your business was gone overnight with the complete loss of on-premise serving? Let's start with you, Sam. How much did things change for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, April was a really, really interesting month. Our wholesale numbers, the off-premise was up massively. We were up nearly triple digits off-premise for the month of April. Obviously, on-premise was down triple digits and then some with returns that came in. It netted out to very minor decline, single-digit red numbers. But the interesting thing was from a shipments perspective, all of our wholesalers massively cut down on their inventories through the month. So while depletions were down single digits, shipments were down about 65%. We saw basically 90% of our wholesaler inventory get depleted over the month of April. So it put pretty massive financial strain onto the brewery in a time where our biggest profit driver, margin driver, cash flow producer in the beer hall was closed, as well as our Springdale barrel room was closed. And we were doing our best to stock up on raw materials going into summertime. So we had a lot of kind of long-term orders in, huge can orders coming into summer, huge raw material orders. So while from a depletions perspective, it hasn't been horrible in the wholesale market, from a cash flow perspective, managing the business has been by far the most challenging period of our careers. So now, luckily, months later, wholesalers' inventories have started to recover. So we have seen those sales, and June is shaping up to actually see inventory levels maybe return almost to normal, a little bit under normal, but to the point where our shipments will actually be even, if not slightly positive against last year. But yeah, really, really bizarre time to be operating a business. And that's without getting into the hospitality operation here, which we've had to kind of reinvent pretty much on a basis last couple of months. Just got a beer garden up and running now that outdoor seating is available to us here in Massachusetts, and got about half of our employees back on that side of the business. So things seem to be going in the right direction. It's been a heck of a couple of months to work through, but yeah, here we are, still standing. They haven't got us yet.
I mean, that's all any of us can ask for, is to still be standing. So Adam, how about for you guys? How much of a shock to the system was COVID for Castle Island?
Yeah, it ended up being a pretty big hit for us. Month of April, I think we were off close to 70% on our overall dollars. Our tap room in 2019 was right around 20% of our overall revenue. That pretty much vanished. In addition, our wholesale volume, which is the remainder of our business, is about 50% on-premise volume, and that disappeared overnight as well. So we were definitely in a tough spot for April and May. We were fortunate to be a PPP recipient, so that kind of helped us weather the storm. We ended up furloughing 30 of our 36 people March 23rd, and we were able to bring them all back, I think the second week in April. So rough few weeks there, but we made it over the hump. We were also fortunate where we had a little bit of extra capacity. We were able to do some contract brewing for others where the off-premise was really kind of surging, as Sam was talking about. A number of our colleagues here in the state were looking for extra volume, extra capacity, or they were looking to put their beer in cans for the first time. So we were able to kind of turn over some of our assets to help them while also helping ourselves. And it was kind of a win-win for everyone. Now, as we look towards June, on-premise is kind of slowly starting to shake off the cobwebs, and we've seen shipments pick up a little bit. But obviously, we're very much on our toes because we know it's going to be a long time before things get back to normal.
Definitely. It's going to be weird for a while, I'm sure. David, how about things for Wormtown? How are you guys doing since the middle of March?
Sure. So Corona hit us hard on a couple of fronts. First being that March 14th, we were supposed to be celebrating our 10th anniversary. And that usually draws a couple thousand people through the brewery on that date. And we were not able to celebrate a really important birthday for us with all those people, which would have been really cool. Plus, our actual birthday is on March 17th, which is obviously a great drinking day in Massachusetts. So we lost both of those right away. And like a lot of craft breweries, we tend to play really heavily in the on-premise. But I think we do a little bit more than most. So about 70% of our overall business is draft in restaurants and bars. So when Charlie Baker made that announcement on that Sunday, I believe it was the 15th, 70% of our volume dried up immediately. We were lucky to be nimble, and we switched all of our production immediately over to can and package. So we've really been focused on having a bigger presence in the off-premise, competing more for shelf space, ad features, that kind of stuff, while the package store business thrived. But that was not natural for our business and how it was set up. So we're learning on the fly, trying a lot of new things. We've activated our Patriot Place pilot system. And for our taproom business, we're at least starting to release a lot of new and experimental beers for our team. We've basically given our brewers carte blanche to go down there whenever they want, however they want, and brew whatever they want. And every day we're seeing something new come out of that, which has been kind of fun. And it's helping drive that to-go business in our tap rooms, which helped us survive that as well.
Great. Now, Dino, I know your model's a little bit different than everybody else's. So without without distribution, how did things change for you?
Yeah. So again, I mean, we're pretty much all on premise. We really were able to pivot pretty early, though. I'd say probably about 70% of our capacity is packaged product cans, and then 30% is taproom. So immediately we lost taproom. We were sitting on a fair amount of kegs, which actually, oddly enough, at the same time, we had some different markets that had reached out just that where it hadn't hit yet. They were still able to stay open and fill growlers, crawlers, things like that, and asked us for kegs. So we sent some stuff down to DC, Virginia, Florida, and even the West Coast to clear out our keg inventory, which was great. And then we just pivoted and just started canning everything that we could. Instead of pulling off kegs for taproom and bars and restaurants, we exclusively went canning. We do have a pilot system, which we typically use to feed our taproom as well. And we shifted, instead of doing experimental hoppy beers on that, we started doing some bigger stouts and sours, things that had a little bit more of a lifespan. So, and then now we've gotten back to doing a lot of new different test recipes and stuff that we're getting excited to release once the time comes.
We've seen so many changes over the last, I guess we're at 3 months now, that you guys have had to act really nimbly. And I guess I got to wonder, how are you strategizing? Like, are you, how far into the future can you look at this point? Is it, week to week, or is it, can you do a 6-month planning at this point? And I guess I'll start with Adam.
Man, come on. I mean,
That's the
I
easy
think
question, right?
On the hot seat.
It's really all crystal ball work at this point, mostly because we've never been here before, so we don't really know where we're going. And I haven't talked to anyone or heard from anyone who feels strongly that they do know where we're going. I think for us, we're really looking at how do we still find growth in a stable way. This is not the time to get cavalier and take chances. This is the time to stick to your guns and stick with what works. So that's kind of our plan. There's clearly still a big focus in the off-premise that we're seeing, especially where the on-premise just is not going to be back to capacity for a long time. So we're really drilling down. We're looking at scan data. We're strategizing a lot more, really investing heavily in those chain relationships. We started working with 3 Tier Beverages out of Chicago, which is a newer consulting firm headed up by our good buddy Don Bixel, who was at Revolution for years. He's been really helping us work with 3 Tier and with VIP as well, start really digging into the sales analytics side of things and get a little more strategic, which I think is going to be a big part of the future for us. And frankly, should be for a lot of other breweries who are distributing to the off-premise, because at least for the next 12 months, that's where the action is. So for the next 6 months, that's where we're focusing for sure.
I hope Bixel gives you a discount for that plug. Sam.
He better.
Yeah, he really better. Sam, how are strategy sessions at Jack's Abbey and Springdale going at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to keep working on longer term visions and try and take some guesses at the way the markets are gonna change over the next 3-6 months, the next year. But I mean, you got to be able to rip those plans up every week when they go to crap, because there's no certainty. If you're making any assumptions on when the on-premise will reopen and what level of business it will do, you're shooting in the dark. So we're taking stances. We know the things that have been working for us for the last 3 months. We're going to keep investing in those things. We're going to do everything we can to get hospitality programs in-house back on their feet. But yeah, longer term, I mean, there's so much changes, and there's so much on the docket yet to change. We still haven't seen the massive shakeout of closings, which at least in the restaurant tier, like, has to be coming. And who knows if it will really hit the brewery tier in the same way. Hopefully not, but certainly possible. So I don't know. We're making lots of plans, but they're all very tentative plans, and we're doing our best to muddle through it all.
David, it feels like Wormtown's strategy is maybe sped up a little bit. Yesterday, I believe you guys put out a press release about your recent New England expansion. Is that the case? Are you guys speeding up, and how are you looking at the future at this point?
It's probably a little bit of both. I mean, Adam makes a great point, which is now is really the time to focus in on what you know and what you're good at and what's proven. So really what we are doing is we're taking things that were on our radar, that we knew were sound business strategies, that made sense and were easy buttons. Vermont was one of those. And quite frankly, we weren't necessarily gonna open Vermont, but when we met with the wholesalers and they laid out their pitch for, this is a monumental time where cookouts and back deck parties and social gatherings, socially distanced gatherings, were going to be more important than they ever were. And their position was, you'll never have a better opportunity to introduce your brand in this market than right now. So that made it kind of an easy button to push. And then for us strategically, it's really just doing what we've always done and things that we had in front of us that we knew were smart, sound business decisions, and just activating them maybe a little bit quicker. But, to your question of setting strategic policy, we don't know what the rules of the game are going to be. We can't set a plan in place when you don't know what the next rule is going to be, when it's going to change, how it's going to change. So we just take every day, day by day, and try to do smart things.
Dino, COVID-19's pretty much exposed one of the major flaws in the taproom philosophy of just selling in your own four walls. But you've got lines still, and you're selling out of beer. Has this changed the way you're sort of viewing the business at all?
Yeah, it's funny. We keep saying that. We're like, all right, well, it's not ideal, but the situation that we have now, the environment we have, it's working per se. So we're a little cautious about that, and we don't want to disrupt it too much, too soon. So we're kind of taking more of a let's step back approach, and let's see how things start to iron themselves out. Safety obviously at the top of the concerns. We've been fortunate that we've been able to keep everyone working, which is nice. And I know I remember back at the beginning, I'm sure just like everyone else here, that it was like we're waiting for the next shoe to drop. Like, what's considered to be an essential business? Are we going to be able to open? What are we going to do? And those were very, very stressful, sleepless nights, not knowing what to expect. And I think once we learned, what our fate was going to be, if you will, then we said, okay, all right, now we know what the arena is that we're playing in, and now it gives us a chance to strategize and really figure out what's going to be the best plan. So right now, again, I think we're business as usual until we, because for us it's been that on-premise experience, and that's really what we've been so concerned with. And we don't want to slap something together now and have people leave like, oh, this isn't what I remembered, or this isn't what I heard. And we want to make sure that when the gates do open up, that we can get back to a point where, people are really enjoying themselves and telling everybody else, telling their friends.
So for everybody watching at home, you can absolutely send in questions to our text line. If you want to ask these guys a question, it is 617-336-8560. Shout out to whoever wrote in to say that I look great today. That was very much appreciated. The same person has also asked, Massachusetts has always been way behind the times when it comes to liquor laws. We don't have happy hour. It's really sad. I guess that's just what happens when your state is founded by Puritans. But knowing how many places are struggling, what do you guys think it will take to get these laws changed and brought into 2020? And what would you like to see changed? Adam, let's start with you.
Yeah, we've often been frustrated, as I know others have, by kind of the existing liquor law structure in Massachusetts. And sometimes it feels like things move at a glacial pace. But I think I'm actually somewhat surprised in a pleasant way and impressed with what the state was able to turn around for breweries. Is it ideal? No. Are we the only industry facing challenge? Of course not. So I think all things considered, we're in a good spot where we are. Looking to the future, I think we'd kind of like to see a little more flexibility around outdoor area drinking, around the options for direct consumer sales. But, on the whole, as I've talked to other brewery owners around the country, we've still kind of got it better than a lot. So I don't know that there's a whole lot for us in Massachusetts to be griping about. Are there frustrations? Yes, but we're still kind of towards the top of the list. Sam might have other opinions on that, given his role as president of the guild, but that's at least where I sit.
Great. I mean, David, you've had 10 years operating a brewery in Massachusetts. What's on your wish list for legislative changes?
Oh boy. I kind of fall into the camp with Adam that, Mass is every controlled business is difficult. But we understand our laws. We've been successful with our laws. You're looking at a screen of people who have all done very well and outperformed the country. So we've got it okay here. I will be fascinated to watch and see how all of these temporary regulations, be it for outdoor or to-go servings from the on-premise to allowing us and the governor saying, be creative to municipalities about approving outdoor, patios, etc. I'll be curious to see if only that stuff stays in place. It'll be a significant change to our business. So if we can hold on to what we've been able to do over the last 3 or 4 months and add back our old business, that's going to be a fascinating model to watch.
Sam, the last time you and I met in person, which feels like it was 50 years ago, we talked a little bit about the single day licenses for beer gardens and a little bit about franchise reform. In your role as the guild president, have either of those things seen any movement, or have they all been backburnered?
No. I mean, the state house has turned into a single issue place right now. It's COVID or nobody's listening. And it's hard enough to get people to listen when it's about COVID anyway. So all efforts have been laser focused on trying to ensure brewers have as much flexibility as possible to get back to business. It's a really challenging dynamic for what at the end of the day is a relatively small industry. So when compared to, the writing of legislation that's going to affect thousands and thousands of restaurants, it's hard to get the attention on, the smaller piece for a couple hundred tap rooms. So that's where the focus has been, making sure our industry is being addressed. We are getting as clear as possible guidelines on what we can and can't do. It has been a heck of a challenge to get that out of the State House. I think brewers are still struggling, kind of muddling through some of these gray areas with their local municipalities, as the state has sort of kind of left some gray areas that some municipalities are allowing leeway, some are being, interpreting things quite a bit more strictly. So that's the main goal right now. Get as much flexibility as possible for brewers to get taproom operations back to some sort of normal, and at least allow brewers to adapt. So yeah, are we going to be able to do exactly what we were doing 3 months ago? Not happening, but at least give us the flexibility to adapt to whatever guidelines, whatever the important things that the state sees to protect public safety, public health. We just want the opportunity to adapt to those guidelines.
Right. I mean, I feel like the past few months have been a massive shift in terms of what everybody is allowed to do, and we've all kind of adjusted pretty quickly to like basically a whole new way of life. So, Dina, what changes have you seen in consumer behavior in people visiting the tap room?
I mean, people are buying to go, and whether it's just out of fear or what, I don't know, but they're definitely coming in, and they're excited, and they're buying as much as they can. It's, you know, we joke sometimes, like, you'd think that we weren't going to make beer anymore, but it's great. I mean, so that's really been the biggest thing. But we, you know, every day we're constantly asked, like, well, when are you opening up? When are you going to open up? You're going to open up outside? And we just, you know, we just got to kind of weather that a little bit and you know, take a pause, and eventually we'll get back there, and it'll be better than ever. So
you would say general purchase size has increased?
Absolutely. Yeah. People, you know, before you'd have somebody would come and grab a 4-pack, and now they're maxing out and getting as much as they can. And we're seeing them, you know, week to week. So it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of reopening, Jack's Abbey just opened up for service for the first time yesterday, right, Sam?
Yeah, the beer garden got open yesterday. It was a great, successful day.
How many people came out? What was the mood like? What did people want? Give us sort of a view of what a reopening in Massachusetts looks like.
It was great. I mean, we had throughout the course of the day about 250 people through the beer garden. So we have a big space outdoors. Was our parking lot as of a week and a half ago. You know, we're asking a lot from our staff, from just face masks every moment they're here, to a temperature check walking in, and certifying that they're in good health every day, and you know, really stepped up cleaning and sanitation procedures and all these things. Our staff is on board. We're also asking a lot from the consumers. And we're asking people to stay away if they're not feeling well. We're asking them to wear a mask when they're not seated. We're asking them to, you know, order this way or that way. And it was really great to see, despite everything we are asking of the people coming in, everybody was on board. We did not get pushback. We just got, you know, smiles. People were smiling with their eyes, I guess. And people were just excited to be out of the house, I think. People were psyched to be sitting in a beer garden and having a beer, having a pizza for a couple hours. So everybody got on board. Everybody did their part, and we had a great day.
A couple hundred people through a beer garden on a Wednesday, that has to be a pretty stellar day.
Yeah, it felt really, really good to have some people out. There was a lot of excitement right out of the gates with the announcement that we were going to be reopening. So it was a great day.
David, Wormtown operates a pair of spaces, one near Gillette, one in Worcester. Give me the thought process on what it's going to look like reopening those places.
Sure. So we reopened Worcester a week ago today. The city of Worcester was incredibly aggressive and accommodating with all of their restaurants and breweries. They ran a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday cattle call to get outdoor spaces approved. So we were able to take a large chunk of our parking lot and kind of incorporate it into our existing outdoor patio. We actually have the same amount of seating capacity as we had for total capacity standing room in the tap room beforehand. So Worcester's been very strong, stronger numbers for the first week than we actually had pre-corona, which has been great. But we're also partnered next to a bunch of restaurants, and we're seeing activity in the on-premise, at least. It was unexpected, so it's been really strong. Patriot Place is a little bit more interesting. First of all, it was actually an area that's extremely busy non-Patriots games. So February and early March and even the tail end of January, Patriot Place was actually twice as busy as Worcester was for us for our tap room. And apparently, or what we had been told, was June, July, August are some of the busiest months there. But that's been a little bit more of a challenge. It's certainly not seeing signs of life. We're open in more limited hours, only Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it's just starting to kind of come back. Some of the restaurants still haven't opened at Patriot Place. They're working on trying to create some energy down there, but it's going to be interesting. And, on top of it, obviously that location relies on Revolution games. It relies on, a couple Taylor Swift concerts that were canceled this year, the Country Fest that was canceled or postponed. And then, the big questions around the NFL, will there be fans allowed in the stadiums? And then you add to it the fact that, Tom Brady and Gronk are playing down in Tampa, and we keep turning around and getting more and more bad news there. But at the end of the day, we're getting a lot of great beer out of there. So that's going to be a lot of fun for us either way.
How much do you miss Tom Brady?
I'll tell you what, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to talk about this or not. The Kraft family has been so amazing to us as tenants down there that I don't remember who Tom Brady is. I just root for the Patriots.
I don't believe you.
Listen, I'll go on record. They have been the most amazing partners you could ever find, and the way they have stood behind their tenants down there and their property has been unbelievable.
I don't mean about the Kraft family. I mean about not knowing who Tom Brady is anymore. So.
Oh, yeah, we're over him.
Adam, I'm guessing you're over Brady as well.
Yeah, we wish him the best. It's fine if he wants to go down to Tampa and blow a 16-game season. That's okay by us.
Well, back on track here, Castle Island. You've got a beautiful parking lot. Are you going to be utilizing that to get more people out to your place?
Yeah, we know a thing or two about opening beer gardens and parking lots, having done it 2 years in a row now up in Charlestown. We're kind of in a fortunate spot, owning all of the equipment, all the gear to mobilize a beer garden in a short amount of time. So in the last 72 hours, we've seen it all come together. Our team's been working pretty much nonstop to turn probably about 25 parking spaces into a 100-person capacity beer garden, which is about on par with the size of our tap room. And we've had a ton of customers over the last 3 years that we've been operating our tap room ask when we're going to open up outdoor space. So even though we haven't yet opened reservations, I think they're coming this afternoon. We've had a ton of interest, people who are really psyched to be able to come out and get a couple of pints in the sunshine. But like Sam, we're taking it real serious. There's a pretty long prescribed list of rules and regulations that we need to follow to make sure that everyone's being safe. But we also want people to have a good time because everyone's been cooped up at home for the last 3 months.
Dino, are you going to be making any tweaks to vitamin C to get some people outdoors?
Again, right now, no. We're going to just have to see where things go in the next few weeks, see how the next phase goes. And, we believe me, we want to get that outside open as soon as possible, but we have to be smart about it and do it the right way. So you'll probably see me at Sam or Adam's outside beer gardens.
So we just got another audience question in, and if you have a question that you want us to ask these guys, you can text it to 617-336-8560. But somebody wants to know if you guys are modeling what it looks like for your businesses if there has to be another shutdown later in the year. They don't even want to think about it. We'll take it as it comes. But we did just see a closure out in Seattle where an employee at Fremont had tested positive, so they've decided to shut down and test everybody. So do you have plans or protocols in place for any situations like that? Sam, why don't we start with you since you guys did just reopen yesterday?
Yeah, we have a whole set of plans. We've been working on this a little bit with our local health department as well as what exactly we need to do if somebody has symptoms, if somebody lives with somebody who gets diagnosed. If somebody gets diagnosed, there are all kinds of different scenarios. And it's been really challenging to, I don't know, I feel like I need a medical degree now to own a brewery. But it's been really, really strange. We're super uncomfortable asking questions about people's health. And kind of as employers have been beat into our brains to keep these things private and not ask questions about people's private health. And it's very strange to be, keeping a log of everybody's temperature on their way in the door and asking people to fill out a log that affirming that they are in good health every day. So it's been really bizarre. As far as like what happens if we get shut down, like, we'll survive. It'll be awful, but like, I don't know how many more of these I've got the energy for to shut it all down and bring it all back. But I think it would certainly be foolish to not have a plan that includes the possibility of having to shut it down again.
Adam, how about you guys? Are you planning on what this might look like in the fall?
I mean, we've got contingency plans in place for a temporary shutdown in the event that, someone tests positive, or a longer term shutdown in the event that there's a second wave. But as Sam kind of alluded to earlier, those plans are only worth about the time that went into them, and not a whole lot more right now. We could be forced to kind of scrap all that. We're just trying to stay nimble and stay on our toes as best we can. Again, like I said, it's all crystal ball work. So a plan is only worth so much.
And so you're about to get going outside, and I know that generally seems to be safer than inside. So once you can open inside, do you think you will, or do you guys think it's just safer to keep doing outdoor operations?
Yeah, I mean, I think to the degree that we can and that the town will give us the green light, we certainly plan to reopen indoors, especially because the one thing we've learned running a beer garden the past couple of years is you're battling the weather. And if it rains out there, we want something, from the day instead of nothing. But we're going to be taking that part really slowly, really carefully, making sure that, everything looks right before we hit the go button.
David, how are you guys approaching the idea that perhaps we'll get bars and restaurants shut down again later in the year? How does that affect your plans?
Well, to begin with, if I'd known you were going to ask questions like this, I would have started with a double IPA, not a 5.2% IPA.
We'll give you a break if you want to go get a different beer.
I might need that. I think the way I look at it is if we have a second shutdown, I'm going full monk life. I'm moving in the brewery, and I'm going to drink every ounce of beer we have and survive off of that for 8 or 9 weeks or whatever it takes. But I don't even want to think about it. But obviously, we survived the first one. Sam talked about health protocol, which we have in place. Adam talked about his business side. We got through the first one. If another one comes, it's going to be painful. It'll be brutal, but we have a plan in place. We know what we did to survive. I'd have to give a shout out to our team, because the only reason we did survive was the way they worked, the effort they did, the support they gave the brewery and us to make that happen was incredible. So, and here is my double IPA someone just brought from the brewery.
Nice. What teamwork. Dino, what are your thoughts on if this happens again?
Well, I'll tell you, I much like my counterparts here, I shudder to think about it. But again, I think the biggest thing for us is just following the protocols that we have in place as far as sanitizing, spacing, masks, gloves, the whole thing, just more from a preventative standpoint, I think, rather than something that's reactionary. So we're doing everything that we can on the front end, including not opening and doing these other things to try to limit our exposure and the chances of something happening. If God forbid something were to happen, we'd have to call in probably the B team to come in and work while any potential people would have been exposed and stepped up our measures that we've done. But again, I hate to even put it out in the universe. So hopefully it doesn't happen.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit, because we talked about you guys' growth at the beginning of this call, and at this point, you know, I think it was last month that Firestone Walker announced that it was going to exit Massachusetts. And I got to wonder, with all the growth that we see from local breweries, what's your guys' take on what that means? You know, we see a top 10 brewer pull out of a state like Massachusetts. What does that say to you guys? And I'll start with David.
Sure. I mean, from my perspective, and you and I have talked about this a lot in the past, I mean, I'm not sure there's a better beer market for craft beer right now than Massachusetts and certainly New England. We've got a ton of great beer coming out of this market right now. You've got a ton of breweries that have achieved significant volume. You got a couple of guys out there, you know, like Dino's Brewery and Treehouse and Trillium that are basically direct to consumer only and still getting to 25, 30, 35, up to 50,000 barrels for Treehouse. I mean, that's unheard of around the country. So this is New England and it's in particular Massachusetts has always been an incredibly competitive market. It's always been a great beer market. And I think we're just seeing craft quality and quantity thrive in and around this area. And the group that's on the screen right here is a tribute to that.
Sam, what's your take?
I mean, I don't know about Firestone Walker. Like, yeah, it's really hard to support a brand from 3,000 miles away, and they absolutely crush. I love that brewery, admire what they've done, but it's just really, really hard, and I think that shows. And I think they did the right thing in pulling out of a market where things weren't working well for them. I guess I just, you know, I think it's a time right now where industry needs to wonder. The last 10 years, the word growth has been like the holy grail. And it's really interesting that you frame this conversation all around growth. And I'm just wondering, like, why? Is growth actually the most important part of this industry? And if we're headed into headwinds, like, does that mean the industry just falls apart if we're not all growing? Does that mean our brands are not relevant anymore if I decline by 3% this year? And I think trying to be more and more cognizant in this place, at Jack's Abbey, of like, growth isn't actually necessarily a good thing. If that's the goal and that's what you plan for and that's what you go out and achieve, that's great. We had plenty of years of growth that were not a good idea, that were too fast, where we didn't have the infrastructure, where we lost tons of cash. Yeah, we showed a profit on a P&L, but the cash was flying out of this building faster than we could count. I would just like really love it if we could stop talking about growth like it's the only thing that matters and that it's the thing that defines whether or not a brand has any value. I don't think growth is important. If you're in a phase where it is important, then sure, it's important to your company. But what does Firestone Walker need to grow in Massachusetts for? Does that mean Firestone Walker isn't a great brand? Obviously not. You're out of your mind. Growth isn't actually on its own necessarily a good thing. And I really think we need to figure out as an industry how to see value in businesses, brands, not just defining it by a growth number.
I think that's totally fair. And that's definitely something that, yes, we did frame this discussion around growth. But I think that it's also a thing of, and we may not have articulated this as well, you guys are building strong brands. And that's one of the things that's driving that growth. So
I'm not trying to like attack you specifically, and that probably came off like that. But I think if you look around the entire industry, just look at the way the Brewers Association celebrated growth for the last decade as if it was the holy grail. And yes, is it a good thing to see craft beer growing? Obviously it is. But for like an individual company, it may or may not be a good thing. And I think as an industry, we've gotten obsessed with growth, and that we need to break that addiction somehow, because it's not necessarily a healthy addiction.
Sam, how would you define success without growth?
Oh, geez. I mean, you could define it as profitability. If you're just coming from a business standpoint, you could define it by having like stability and employees who enjoy their jobs, and maybe working in, God forbid, a little bit of like quality of life and work-life balance, and maybe having some fulfillment from your job, and maybe just like enjoying what you do every day. I don't know. That sounds pretty successful to me.
Me too.
None of those things depend on growth. Actually, growth probably kills a lot of those things.
Guys, anybody else on the panel want to jump in on any of these thoughts?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, we did 1,200 barrels last year, which is nothing compared to what these guys are doing. And yet we had people in our tap room from all over the world, and we continually have people from all over the world that know who we are. And I mean, quality of life is so huge to us. We've created an environment where people love to come to work. They don't consider it to be a job. You know, I've got little ones at home, and my partners have little ones at home, and to be able to actually spend time with them and not have to have this growth plan of being the biggest brewery. I mean, we don't know how big we want to get, and I can tell you, we don't want to get that big. We don't want to sacrifice quality. You know, I think we could do a fair amount of barrelage and make a good living and still be able to go home and sleep at night and enjoy the other things, the other aspects of our life that are much more important.
Wait, David, you've been in the industry for a decade. I'm sure you have some thoughts on this too. What does success look like to you guys at Wormtown without growth?
Sure, and I'll just throw it out there. My dad was in the industry before I was born, so I'm 49 years of the industry at this point in time. You know, I mean, Sam laid out a compelling argument that, you know, all those things do matter, and ultimately everything's about work-life balance. So I think there's components of all of it. You know, growth is nice to have, but it's not necessarily the most important measure. But everything Sam talked about certainly matters. I think the one thing we may have left off the table was quality of beer. And, you know, you know, just want to shoot it out there. 1,200 barrels, that's amazing. Just because you're at 30 or 40,000 barrels does not mean you sacrificed quality to get there. You know, you can maintain that and still grow and still be a big brewery and still have all of the same, you know, commitments to that. At the end of the day, everybody on this screen has committed themselves to quality beer every step of the way. And I think that's why we've achieved growth. Maybe we didn't start that way to get growth, but we started to make the greatest beer we possibly could. And the consumers voted with their pockets. And they provided us with the growth because we provided them with great high quality beer that was fun to drink and gave them a social environment to do it in.
One other thing, if I could just interject one other thing too. I think New Englanders inherently are also very, very loyal to local brands. And that could be part of it, you know, dovetailing off of what Sam was saying. I mean, how do you manage a brand 3,000 miles away? I mean, there's so many great options here locally. You know, are people searching out Firestone Walker? As amazing as their beer is, I think there's just so many other options locally, and people kind of take, you know, they take ownership in those brands. Like, you know, this is my brewery, and this is who I want to support.
I think you're absolutely right. We see plenty of that here. I personally used to work on a local beer brand that is also national, and that was hard because, you know, you'd have people local to Boston say, well, you're not local, you brew your beer in Pennsylvania and Ohio. And then, you know, in Pennsylvania and Ohio, they'd say, well, you're from Boston. So it's really a tough double-edged sword. So I assume it's hard to sell beer here when you're based in California, no matter how great your beer is, because we have so much great local beer. This has been a really great conversation, guys. I'm really glad you kind of all had things to add. Adam, anything from you on the topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think growth is a really convenient barometer because it's objective. You can measure it in dollars, you can measure it in barrels or CEs, but it's definitely not the best measure of success, in my personal opinion. I mean, I think growth is a great result of success, but growth is not success in and of itself. I think real success is, did you do what you came here to do? For us, Castle Island has been all about building a brand around the idea that beer should be approachable, inclusive, and awesome. And until we've done those three things, we are not successful. And we wake up every day and we have to do all three of those things to be successful. And, while we have definitely found success in the 4.5 years we've been around, we're not done. And hopefully growth follows. That'd be cool. That'd be fun. That'd be awesome. But that's not what we came here to do. Growth is important, but so is profitability. So is smart growth. So is work-life balance. So is staying true to who you are. So is making quality beer. The list goes on and on. There are a whole bunch of different measures of success. And I think growth is just one of them.
We're still getting some audience questions too. I love this growth topic because it's definitely something I agree with you, Sam, on, and I don't want to come off like I'm being defensive or anything on that, because you guys are right. It's not the only barometer. There are so many different barometers of what a successful business is, from Dino pointing out the quality of life issue to Dave pointing out quality of beer to pointing out strong brands. So anyway, I want to get to a couple of these questions before we get out of here, because we've only got a couple of questions or a couple of minutes left. With all the focus on the real challenges of keeping your business and employees healthy, how much time and energy do craft brewers have to focus on innovation in beer styles and new brands right now? And I'll start with Sam, since you guys got some things going on innovation-wise with the 2% beer initiative.
Yeah, we've actually, I think, somehow upped the number of new things that have been coming out of the brewery. We put a brief pause in the middle of March, but I don't know if it was just Jack wanting to mess around more because he wanted to get his mind off of things or what, but the team's been putting out a lot of fun things. You mentioned the 2% beer initiative, which we're just testing in the brewery right now, but we're putting out some really low ABV, 2%, probably not so shocking with the name there. 2% ABV versions of classic styles. We just put out a Pilsner, which is delicious. So yeah, we've been messing around a lot, and I mean, we haven't launched a ton of stuff into the marketplace because it's a pretty tricky time to hand sell in new items. But for our use here in the beer hall with our retail operation and out the beer garden, we've been doing a lot of new stuff.
Adam, you mentioned a focus on core products. How are you finding time for innovation at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we're still slotting it in when we can. Innovation is definitely an important piece of the puzzle here at Castle Island, but without a tap room, which is really our kind of live R&D field, we haven't had the opportunity to put much of that innovation in front of our core consumers. In addition, because our wholesale distributions right now are so focused on our core brands, that hasn't really been an avenue either. So we're still kind of working on things in the background, but it's definitely not getting the light of day that we'd like it to at the moment.
David, quickly, because we're running out of time here, how is your focus on innovation at this point?
So it's pretty high for us, but it's kind of a two-part question, because and Adam talked about this earlier, there's innovation at retail, which goes through distributors, and that's been very, very limited. We stay lean, we stay focused, we offer very little SKUs and very few brands, but they're tried and true. So our innovation, as I mentioned earlier, is really driven behind having that 7-barrel pilot system rocking and rolling at Patriot Place, and using that to come out with 35, 40 case drops that are sold at both locations. And it's letting us play around and understand and experience new things that we can share with our consumers, and ultimately might end up at retail someday. But right now we're just playing around and having a lot of fun, but it's a big focus for us.
Dino, bring you into the conversation here with all those lines and selling all that beer. How are you focusing on new products?
It's funny. I mean, I don't think a day goes by. I guess I'm addicted, because there's not a day that goes by where I'm not like thinking of a new recipe or writing a new one out or something involving recipes. It's the part of the business that I love the most. But we're also doing things like starting a barrel program, both bigger stouts and mixed fermentation. And we're even toying around with some hop seltzers, things like that. We have that small pilot system. It gives us the opportunity to do things like that. So it's we got a lot of fun stuff, and we can't wait for people to come and try them. That'll be the big test.
Great. We
Don't
got
get any
another
ideas,
question.
Sam.
We got a great question from a viewer about PPP money. I know most of you guys have applied for and gotten PPP money. The government just changed the timeline, gave you more time to be able to spend it. So, which is kind of a curveball. So, I mean, how many of you have completely spent all your PPP money? How much do you have left if you haven't? And what was your take on the program? And do you see any more need for government financial aid programs? Adam, let's start with you. I know you mentioned it first.
Yeah, so we received it. We're about 75% of the way through it right now. We had a plan to accelerate that and use all of it by yesterday, actually, which was the end of our 8-week period. Now that they've moved the yardstick, we're kind of scrapping that plan, which has become a recurring theme throughout all this. So we're extending it out a little more. That being said, and I feel pretty strongly about this, it's great that they've kind of reformed the regulations on PPP and what you can use it towards and how long the covered period is. But for them to really change the rules in the middle of the game like that while not offering a second round of funding doesn't really help at all. It actually ends up hurting in a lot of ways. So I'd really like to see federal government kind of offer another tranche of PPP funding.
Dave, what do you think? How did it go for you guys?
Sure, double-edged sword. We did get PPP. We actually were approved on the very first day that it was available. So unfortunately, or fortunately for us, we received it. But by the time they changed the way it could be allocated and the way it could be used and the time period over which it was, we were 100% spent. We would have made different decisions if we had understood the rules differently. But it is what it is. It was a great lifeline for us. It kept our people employed. We had furloughed a big chunk of our base, brought them all back. They worked their tails off, and we can't thank them enough. And we were just glad to be able to do it. So if we get another bite, that's terrific. We'll just have to pay for it as a society down the road.
That's usually how it works. Sam, I know you guys got your application in right away too. I mean, have you spent everything, and what did you think about the program overall?
Yeah, I would just echo what Adam and David said. We have now spent it all. Again, we would have approached it a lot differently had the rules that are in place now been in place from day one. But it was a shot in the arm that helped us through the last 90 days. So yeah, that we're grateful to have had it.
Great. Dino, did you guys get PPP money?
We did. We got a small amount, and we're actually at the point of exhaustion now with that as well. But it was certainly helpful. Again, we were able to keep everyone employed and everybody working, which was huge for us.
Good. That's great. That was the point.
And that's our show for this week. That was awesome, guys. Just to clarify, we are going to take a 1-week break. That's the biggest hiatus we're going to do right now. And then we'll be back July 2nd. I want to thank everybody on today's panel, Sam, Dino, Adam, and David. Thank you to everyone who joined us today, who watched, who tweeted, who sent in questions. Thank you to our audio team. Thanks to Jess. We will see you in a couple weeks. Later.